Now at chapter 4, Thinkers, Beliefs and Buildings, which focuses on the cultural developments between the era 600 BCE to 600 CE. Today, we are going to start our chapter with the stupas. From the earliest time, people tended to regard certain places as sacred. These included sites with special trees or unique rocks or sites of awe inspiring nature beauty. These sites with small shrines attached to them were sometimes described as the chaityas. Buddhist literature mentions several chaityas. It also describes places associated with Buddha's life, like where he was born, that is Lumbini, the place where he attained enlightenment, which was Bodhgaya, the place where he gave his first sermon at Sarnath, and where he attained the Nibbana or salvation in Kushinagra. Gradually, each of these places came to be regarded as sacred. We know that about 200 years after the time of Buddha, Ashoka erected a pillar at Lumbini to mark the fact that he had visited the place. There were other places too that were regarded as sacred. These included the stups. Stups were the mounds which contained the relics of the Buddha, which were the bodily remains or object related to him. The tradition of erecting stupas may have been pre Buddhist, but they came to be associated with Buddhism. Since they contained relics regarded as sacred, the entire stupa came to be venerated as an emblem of both the Buddha and Buddhism. Inscriptions found on the railings and pillars of stupa recorded donations made for building and decorating them. Some donations were made by kings such as the Satavahanas, others were made by guilds such as that of ivory workers who financed part of one of the gateways at Sachi. Hundreds of donations were made by women and men who mentioned their names and their occupation along with their donation. Bhikkhus and bhikkhunis also contributed towards building these monuments. The stup, a Sanskritic word meaning a heap, originated as a simple semicircular mound of earth, later called anda. Gradually, it evolved into more complex structure, balancing round and square shapes. Above the anda was the harnika, a balcony-like structure that represented the abode of the god. Arising from harnika was a mast called the yashti, often surrounded by a chhatri or umbrella. Around the mound was a railing separating the sacred place from the secular world. The early stupas at Sachi and Bharut were plain except for the stone railings which resembled a bamboo or wooden fence. Later, the mound of the stupa came to be elaborately carved with niches and sculptures as at Amravati and other places. Each stupa had a story of its own. As we have just seen, some of these are histories of how they were built. But there are histories of discoveries as well, and let us now turn to some of these. In 1796, a local Raja who wanted to build a temple stumbled upon the ruins of a stupa at Amravati. He decided to use the stone and thought that there might be some treasure buried in what seemed to be hill. Some years later, a British official named Colin Mackenzie visited the site. He found several pieces of the sculpture. By the 1850s, some of the slabs from Amravati were taken to different places, which included the Asiatic Society of Bengal at Calcutta and to Indian Office in Madras and some even to London. Thus, we can see how any new official in the area who came continued to remove sculptures from the site on the grounds like the earlier officials. One of the few men who had different point of view was an archaeologist named H. Cole. He wrote, "It seems to me a suicidal and indefensible policy to allow the country to be looted of the original works of ancient art." He believed that museum should have plaster cast similar sculptures, whereas the originals should remain where they have been found. Therefore, he pleaded for in situ, that means in-site preservation, which was adopted in case of Sachi. Now the question arises, why did Sachi survive and Amravati Stoop did not? Perhaps Amravati was discovered before scholars understood the value of the finds and realized how critical it was to preserve things where they had been found instead of removing them from the site. We have just seen how sculptures were removed from stoops and transported all the way to Europe. This happened partly because those who saw them considered them to be beautiful and valuable and wanted to keep them for themselves. Now let us look some of these sculptures carefully and try to understand what are the meanings of the various carvings that were inscribed on the gates. These sculptures are actually stories in stone. Art historians who have carefully studied the last sculpture at Sachi identify it as a scene from Visantra Jataka. This is a story about general prince who gave away everything to a Brahmin and went to live in the forest with his wife and children. According to hagiographies, the Buddha attained enlightenment while meditating under a tree. Many early sculptures did not show the Buddha in human form. Instead, they show his presence through symbol of an empty seat to indicate the meditation of the Buddha. The stupa was meant to represent the Mahaparinibbana, that is, the attainment of salvation. Another symbol was the wheel. This stood for the first sermon of Buddha at Sarnath. There are also other sculptures which include a beautiful woman swinging from the edge of the gateway holding onto a tree. Scholars realize that it could be a representation of Shalabhanjika. According to popular belief, this was a woman whose touch caused tree to flower and bear fruit. This indicates that not only Buddhist traditions but traditions from the contemporary times were also included in the sculptures. While the Jatakas contain several animal stories that are depicted at Sachi, it is likely that many of these animals were carved to create lively scenes to draw viewers. Elephants were depicted to signify strength and wisdom. Another motif is of a woman surrounded by lotus and elephants which are sprinkling water on her as if they are performing an abhisheka. While some historians identify the figure as Maya, the mother of Buddha, others identify her with the popular goddess Gajalakshmi, literally the goddess of good fortune, who is associated with elephants. So, therefore, every sculpture actually contains a story which helps us to understand the Buddha tradition and various contemporary traditions that existed during the 600 BCE to 600 CE. Now, after Buddhism, there were certain other traditions which further developed. This included the growth of Puranic Hinduism. The notion of savior or Masiha was not unique to Buddhism. We find similar ideas being developed in different ways within the traditions that were now considered part of Hinduism. These included Vaishnavism, a form of Hinduism within which Vishnu was worshipped as the principal deity, and Shaivism, a tradition within which Shiva was regarded as the chief god, in which there were growing emphasis on the worship of chosen deity. In such worship, the bond between the devotee and the god was visualized as one of love or devotion, or which we call bhakti. In case of Vaishnavism, cults develop around the various avatars or incarnation of the deity. 10 avatars were recognized within the tradition. These were forms that deity was believed to have assumed in order to save the world whenever it was threatened by disorder and destruction because of the dominance of the evil forces. Recognizing each of these local deities as a form of Vishnu was one way or other creating a more unified religious tradition. Some of these forms were represented in sculptures as well as other deities. Shiva, for instance, was symbolized by the linga. To understand the meaning of these sculptures, historians have to be familiar with the stories behind them, many of which are contained in Puranas compiled by the Brahmanas. Later, various Raj temples also developed around such tradition. One of the unique features of early temple was that some of the temple were hollowed out of huge rocks as artificial caves that are rock cut temples. Tradition of building artificial caves was an old one and which further led to development of large temples like the Kailashnath temple. But now the question arises, can we see and understand everything? By now you have had a glimpse of rich visual traditions that existed in past, expressed in brick and stone architecture, sculpture and paintings. It will be useful to recall that when 19th century European scholars first saw some of the sculptures of god and goddesses, they could not understand what these were about, as these were very different from the traditions that existed in their countries. Therefore, they used various techniques to understand these sculptures. Art historians often draw upon textual tradition to understand the meaning of sculpture. Well, while this is certainly a far more efficacious strategy than comparing Indian images with Greek statue, it is not always easy to use. One of the most intriguing examples of this is famous sculpture along with the huge rock surface in Mahabalipuram, that is Tamil Nadu. Art historians have searched through the Puranas to identify it with, but they have sharply divided opinions on it, as the one scene in the Puranas depict that it was the river Ganga which started flowing from heaven and descended on the earth, while the same scene has been depicted in Mahabharata where Arjun is doing penance on the river bank in order to acquire alms. Thus, it was quite difficult for the art historians to understand the exact meaning of the sculpture. With this, we end our chapter number 4.